Hello, and welcome to the Sedgwick podcast. My name is Kimberly George, and I am Sedgwick's Global Chief Brand Officer and host for today's conversation. Be sure and hit the like and subscribe buttons so you never miss an episode. With me today is Chris Harvey, Senior Vice President of Client Services and Global Product Recall, and an incident response expert working in our brand protection business. You may recall meeting Chris during our Forecasting 2025 Thought Leadership webinar earlier this year. I promised to bring him back for a mid-year update. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Hi, Kimberly. Thanks for having me.
Of course, we're thrilled to have you. All right, let's start by having you introduce yourself.
Sure thing. So, as you mentioned, I'm Chris Harvey. I'm Senior Vice President of Client Services. I operate under Sedgwick's brand protection offering, where we do specialize predominantly in product recalls, but other types of crisis management situations. So, I personally have over 2 decades of experience with product recalls. I've lost count, but probably close to 2,000 recalls, and that's across a lot of different industries. So I've seen a lot of recalls go well and some with a lot of opportunities. I'm also on the board of directors and currently the president-elect for the International Consumer Product Health and Safety Organization known as ICFSO. I absolutely love helping companies when they're faced with product safety type issues and helping them navigate these unexpected challenges.
Yeah, you have such a wealth of experience. I'm always impressed with this business, as I'm not as familiar with product recalls and brand protection. So I'm looking forward to the conversation today as well. So I know you've mentioned a few aspects of what we do, but give us a feel for the products and services and maybe even some insight into the clients that we serve.
Yeah, so we help companies from a global level, not just in the US or North America, but globally when they're faced with different types of product recall situations or product safety type issues. And again, that's all different industries. So from the pharmaceutical, medical device, food and beverage, automotive, and consumer products. And each of those bring about different challenges and different best practices on how you need to execute the recalls, how you deal with the different regulators as well. And from our standpoint, a lot of our solutions are tailored around preparing companies for a recall situation, but also really when they're faced with it, what do they need to do to correct the issue very quickly? So the full life cycle of a recall, we help them walk through from a logistical standpoint to make sure they're meeting the different regulatory needs and other goals that can come about in a recall situation. We do mostly work with the compliance world, quality, regulatory world as well. Those are the typical contacts that we have, and most responsible for recalls. Sometimes legal departments as well.
Amazing. What does the current landscape look like in the world of product safety?
Yeah, earlier in the year, I think I alluded to the fact we do have a change in administration. No news, really to anyone. And that pendulum typically doesn't swing too far from the left or the right when it comes to product safety. I will tell you in my 20 years, this is one of the more interesting times in the world of product safety. We do know that there's a bit of deregulation or reduction in rulemaking. There's this 1 to 10 rule that we've been seeing. If you want a new rule, you got to take away 10 rules. So, in essence, there's a lot less rulemaking occurring today. Now, with that, though, and surprising, the enforcement when it comes from the agencies like the FDA, the Consumer Product Safety Commission, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or NHTSA, the enforcement is very high right now, which is interesting. They're leveraging a lot of the tools at their disposal to go after companies that have had product safety issues or have some type of safety issue with a product that they manufacture or sell. And in today's environment, which is definitely an interesting environment, companies are challenged with these safety issues. I do think the industry's ripe for them. But there's no shortcuts in safety. So companies need to be very diligent on how they handle these today.
Yeah, how are the numbers trending? Up, down, about the same?
Yeah, you'd think the numbers would be trending down, but they're not. Again, that enforcement levels are very high. So in most industries, especially automotive, consumer, USDA food, the number of recalls is trending up. Now, interesting enough, and this is positive for the marketplace, the number of units is actually trending way down this year. So there may be more recalls that we're seeing, but the number of units or the size of those recalls are not as large. And I usually attribute that to companies doing a better job of putting a fence around the affected population. They're identifying issues more earlier on than maybe they had in the past. Versus where you saw these, multi-million unit recalls that sometimes drove up the averages and skewed some of the numbers.
What are the largest risks today to companies who manufacture or sell unsafe products?
Yeah, I think that the biggest risk is right now within the current environment. I mentioned, with this administration, sometimes you don't see as much rulemaking, but companies need to be probably more diligent than ever. The landscape since the pandemic has seen a supply chain that's been very challenging. This year, with the tariffs, the cost of products, the cost of ingredients and components has really forced companies to look at other vendors and other foreign suppliers to where they're getting those cheaper parts, more cost-effective parts, ingredients, components, and it's been very messy for companies, and it just introduces more risks on what potentially could happen to their product, how a recall could be created when you're introducing new suppliers. So supplier verification is very important, especially foreign supplier verification for companies. We've seen some labor shortages as well, and unfortunately, when times are tough and there's budget cuts, compliance, regulatory quality do get hit. So we've been seeing a lot of movement, especially with the life science industries, with those cuts. So it is very ripe, I think, for companies to be faced with more potential issues that could cause recalls as well. But then at these times, we also see executives or the C-suite. They'll sometimes say, "Do we have to do as much in these recall
Mm.
situation because maybe the enforcement may or may not be as intense or not." So the big thing I say, you still have your brand and your reputation that you need to protect. That can be at risk if you're not doing the right thing and not being very diligent. The other thing with recalls we've seen over the last several years in a very litigious US, the litigation surrounding recalls continues to climb. I know there's law firms that look at every recall to see what are their opportunities for a class action, for a lawsuit. So companies need to be very diligent with how they're executing recalls today. And honestly, the risks could be all the way from large civil penalties. We've seen referrals to the Department of Justice. We've seen unilateral press releases from the Consumer Product Safety Commission, where in a unilateral press release is basically a company's dragging their feet, not wanting to recall. The agency puts out a press release that says this company's product is not safe. And that's horrible for the brand because it showcases they're not taking safety and quality responsibly, and it just damages that company's brand and reputation. So again, the biggest risks in my mind are brand reputation, litigation, and the enforcement is still high today.
Do you have any examples beyond those you've been mentioning here that are public that could be shared?
Not too long ago, a civil penalty of $16 million. That was for failure to report in a timely fashion. So, with that, if you're a very large billion-dollar company, maybe that's a pinprick, but it's still bad for you to have the reputation in the marketplace. Now, a smaller company, that $16 million could be a deeper cut as well. We also saw just last week there was a referral to the Department of Justice for executives that had a recall, and they were sentenced to prison time. It did go through an appeal, and it was confirmed last week. So they are sentenced to 3 years in prison, these executives. So, there is limited leniency right now from what I've been seeing from the agencies when it comes to failure to handle product safety responsibly.
I knew you'd give us a good example, but I had no idea it would include jail or
Scary,
prison.
scary stuff. Yeah, yeah.
Wow. What should companies proactively do to mitigate their risks?
Yeah, I mean, again, like as I mentioned, there's no shortcuts when it comes to product safety. So companies can't just cross their fingers and hope a recall doesn't happen to them. They need to understand what are their risks? What's the risk landscape today? So there's data publicly available, whether it's FDA, Consumer Product Safety Commission. Sedgwick does put out a quarterly recall index where we look at those data and trends from a global perspective. So look and see, are there products you're selling being recalled? Are the competitor products out there being recalled? What lessons can be learned? What are the risks? And they need to proactively do that. They should be looking at a recall plan as well. Is their recall plan robust enough? Is it customized by the current environment we're in today? The products they sell, the hazards as well. Building that customized, robust game plan is incredibly important. Training your team, and then making sure you test the plan as well. Great way to identify gaps or deficiencies when your hair's not on fire with a real recall situation. Have that team identified, have the war room ready to go if you have an issue. And there's really three things that companies, this will protect their brand, that they have to do in every recall. I always say speed, transparency, and empathy. You can't be seen as dragging your feet in a recall situation, holding back, delaying things. Transparency can't be seen as hiding things, watering down verbiage. The agency doesn't like it. It doesn't incentivize consumers to actually pay attention and take action. And then empathy. A lot of times companies are afraid to say, I'm sorry, I apologize. And that's not a bad thing. You have inconvenienced the marketplace. So it is okay. I would put empathy into your language, train your call center agents as well, because it will help protect your brand.
That's really good advice. You mentioned the recall index that you and the team publish. Could you tell the audience a little bit more about that? What's included and how do they have access to it?
Yeah, the recall index is something we've been doing for well over a decade. So we have a lot of data that we get to pull on from trends. So we pull data from the FDA enforcement report, from National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, USDA, Food, and other government agencies. So the main agencies in the U.S. And we examine, are recalls going up? Are they going down? What are the hazards? What are the trends? And this should be very helpful to give inside information to the marketplace on the products they manufacture or sell on what they need to be on the lookout for. Now, we not only do the US, we also do Europe, and then we've done our first Australia one as well. So in August, we will put out the US and European versions. You can register if you're not already getting those invites. Let me know. We can get you registered for that. And then in September, we'll do a webinar on the Australia one as well. I do recommend if you're globalized, your company is selling or handles product throughout the globe, to check out each of them because they do provide unique perspectives.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. I think our audience will have interest in being able to participate and read the index. So that's wonderful. How does Cedric help companies in the realm of product safety?
Yeah, and this really ties into what I've mentioned before. It's two prong recall readiness. So we've been doing this for 30 years, probably 8,000 product recalls. So we've seen a lot of different things. And I always say it's the 95% 5% rule, that companies plan for 95%, but that 5% trips them up and they end up spending 95% of their time messing with that. So we have all these years of experience. So what we like to do is get with our clients and walk them through a lot of different scenarios that maybe they didn't think of from a readiness standpoint. And that does also involve the recall plan development, the training, and the mock recall simulations. Where in some cases we might just show up at a company and says, "Guess what? You're having a recall," and they have to work through the process. It's definitely very beneficial for them to do it and not have to actually have a product safety issue. And then we offer companies assistance throughout the life cycle of the recall, from all the logistics, from notifying the marketplace, call centers, websites, collecting responses, physically collecting or handling the product, and then remediating, whether that's a refund, a replacement, a repair, and then the final disposition of the product. And then what's really important is being able to collect all the data that's occurred during the life of the recall to show the agencies you've done your due diligence, to show the market that you've ran an effective recall. So we really help with all of from the initial recall strategy or corrective action plan all the way to the end of the recall type situation, really hand-holding our clients through the process.
Thank you for sharing that. So, Chris, you are out in the market. I see you all over LinkedIn. I know that you also lead a number of customer collaborations where industry segments can come together. Will you talk a little bit about where our audience can both find you and learn more about what you're doing, and then also some of those collaboration sessions that you host?
Yeah, absolutely. So we love to put out a lot of thought leadership out to the market and bring like groups and different stakeholders from the world of product safety together. So we do put out when we're not doing our webinar on our index, we do these quick fire webinar series on a monthly basis. And we do basically kind of podcast style where we may interview different stakeholders, whether it's a PR firm, law firms, compliance consultants, et cetera, just to learn what's the landscape, what's the best practices, what are the pain points. So be on the lookout for that. We do put out a lot of topics. And then we love to meet, we call these recall roundtables, where we get a group of different stakeholders together, whether it's retailers, distributors, manufacturers, PR firms, consultants. We get them together and we just explore what are your pain points for recalls? What are best practices? What are the future holds? How can we collectively, as a product safety community, shape what the future looks like? Talk with the agencies and see how we can make it a better process, a better consumer experience, a patient experience within these. So we're looking to do more and more. We try to do them regionally so people don't have to travel around as much. So be on the lookout for those. And we're always open. If there are particular topics you're interested in, we love to pull things together and do new things.
Yeah, that's fabulous. I appreciate you sharing the additional information. We're coming up on the end of our time together. Do you have any final thoughts you want to share with our audience?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing right now is there are no shortcuts with product safety. And, you have to be very diligent. You have to keep your foot on the pedal because, the risks are real right now. You have to protect your company, your brand. I always say it's the regulatory aspect, but it's also the brand and reputation and the risks from litigation that's super important. And the best way to do that, number one, is to be prepared for a recall type situation.
Chris, thank you for joining me today. It's been a great conversation.
Thanks, Kimberly.
Be sure and check out our product recall solutions at sedgwick.com. Thanks to you, our audience, for joining today. And please be sure and hit the like and subscribe buttons on your way out so you never miss an episode. Until next time.